Well, good morning, Bob. Thanks so much for agreeing to come and be interviewed as part of Gwinnett County's Bicentennial Story Vault project.
My pleasure.
We've known each other a long time. We've worked on a lot of things in Norcross, and what we thought we might chat about this morning is about the revitalization of Norcross, which has been an ongoing thing for many years. But before we jump into that, I thought I would first ask you why you chose to live in Norcross, how you first came to Norcross.
Well, I came to Norcross in 1988. I was transferred down here by AT&T. And then in '89, I took an early retirement. Merle and I who also worked for AT&T, we were married in 1990, and we went looking for a house. She was working still in Alpharetta. I was traveling a lot, so I had to go to the airport at least once a week. And we have a lot of our interests are downtown. We belong to the Botanical Garden. We belong to the High Museum. We had football tickets for the Falcons. And so we wanted a location that was convenient to all of those. And Norcross is located right in the center where it belongs. It's 30 minutes in any direction to any place we wanted to go. So that's why we decided to move into Norcross in 1991.
1991. And you were still working at the time? Yeah.
At the time, I was working as a business consultant, traveling pretty much all over the world.
I see. And so Norcross became your home. And at the time, early 90s, what was the downtown of Norcross like?
Downtown of Norcross in the early 90s was pretty quiet. There was a lot of vacant buildings. The businesses there were not doing real well. They had trouble keeping businesses coming in because they would come in, they would not make any profit, and they would move out again. So it was not a burgeoning town, burgeoning economy at that point.
Okay. Let's fast forward a few years to about 2000, 2001, and your life changed because you retired, and I was wondering if at that time you thought you would become very involved in the city. Did you envision that as part of your retirement?
I did not envision that, but I sort of semi-retired in 2000, 2001, and then got involved in the Lions Club. And then from that became part of a small group that called ourselves the Progressive Development Committee, and we were looking for ways to revitalize Norcross economically. And so that's kind of how the whole thing got started. This was in early 2002 when we met for the first time.
So the Progressive Development Committee was perhaps a organization of organizations?
It was a kind of a loosely organized group. We had representatives from the service organizations. I was representing the Lions. Bill Barks came in from the Masons Club. We had people from that owned businesses. We had property owners, and then we had people who just came in because they lived in Norcross and were interested in seeing the town develop and come to life.
As you look back on the PDC, I believe you initially met, there was no coffee shop in town.
That's correct.
So I think, tell us where you started meeting.
We met in the Masonic Lodge for several months then. And I think there were 8 of us that started out. And we looked at other communities like Carrollton, like Madison, that had Decatur, that had successful development projects going, and got some ideas from them, and then looked around to see what we thought were the impediments that were keeping Norcross from growing, and started from there.
So as part of the initiatives of the PDC, could you mention any? What are your recollections of your first initiatives?
One of the first things that we did was looked at the structure of the city government, which we thought was not ideal. And the city council, we thought needed some new memberships. So we got busy, we did some campaigning, and we got several new and progressive thinking members elected to the city council. And then we got the city council to work on reorganizing the city government and changed it from a strong mayor council city government to a city manager government with the city council acting as more of a board of directors. They hired a professional city manager, and over a period of time developed a very professional staff within the city. And that, I think, was what really got the city moving. That, and we also talked to the business owners, we talked to the restaurant owners, and one of the things we discovered was that in those days the restaurants were not able to serve liquor with meals. And so we got a referendum together and managed to pass an ordinance that we called liquor by the drink. And with that ability to serve liquor with your meals, the restaurant business kind of took off. And we went from a couple of restaurants to, I think, 8 restaurants in a fairly short time. And most of them have done well ever since.
What was the reaction to liquor by the drink by the community at the time?
It was mixed. There were a lot of people who, Gwinnett was basically a dry county at that point, and there were a lot of people who were opposed to any kind of liquor sales within the city. But there were also people who had moved in, maybe had come from other places, and there were people who understood that the health of a restaurant depended on being able to get people to come there for dinner, and people, if they couldn't have a cocktail with their dinner, would very likely go somewhere else, and did. And so we managed to round up enough votes that we got a majority of the voters to approve the referendum, and
the
it
rest
was
is
in
history.
place.
Yeah.
That was it.
Right. There's another initiative I want to ask you about, and that is the Downtown Development Authority. What was the origins of that?
There had been a Downtown Development Authority back in the 80s, I think, and it kind of died out and then was eventually disbanded. We saw the need for one. We saw that the communities that had significant growth almost always had a Downtown Development Authority or some similar organization. So we got the City Council to reconstitute the DDA, and it was staffed with people who had a pretty progressive outlook and understood that in order to have a downtown that's vibrant, that you had to have businesses that were vibrant. And so that's where the new DDA got formed. A couple of years later, I became a member of it and eventually became the chairman of it. We did things like we had Lillian Webb Park built. It was a $5 to $7 million investment that we put into the city. We bought a couple of pieces of land. We got a piece of land that the city had owned, turned over to the DDA. We sold it to the people who run the Blue Market, own the Blue Market now, helped them, finance them to get into business there. We helped finance the what is now the 45 South Cafe, the coffee house. And we got one tenant that came in there and wasn't too successful with it, but then we got another tenant that came in. We financed his purchase of the business, and then once he got established, we financed ourselves out of it and got a DCA loan from the government, Georgia state government, to pick up the financing so that we had the money to work on other things. That coffee house has now developed into a real community center for Norcross. In fact, the PDC, which is kind of morphed from a active political group into a sort of an informational exchange now. We started with 8 people. Now a meeting every Wednesday morning draws anywhere from 20 to 40 people, and sometimes with speakers. And it's every Wednesday morning in that coffee house. So that coffee shop has become a central gathering place for people in Norcross, and very successful.
It's a real hub. It's
Yes.
a real hub. And it is interesting how it's become that central location for the PDC, even though that many years later. The Lillian Webb project, the Lillian Webb Park project, under your leadership, can you describe the park before the plans for the new improved park?
The original park was a sort of a run-down baseball field. It had been a baseball field there for years because Norcross has a long history of baseball.
Yes.
But it was not being used a lot. And the Livable Centers Initiative study that was conducted there made the point that there needed to be a central gathering point, something that would draw people into the city of Norcross. And so we hired an architect to come up with a plan for a park, and that was the end result of it. We went over the plans many times with the architect, and finally came up with one that we thought was good. We had a lot of citizen input to it, a lot of public meetings, and finally came up with a final plan. We hired one firm to do the engineering drawings and all of the construction drawings, and then a construction firm to come in and build the park. And it was about a year's project to get that park built. It has turned out to be a real gathering point and a real jewel for the city of Norcross.
Really is. Yeah. A few years ago, friends of ours who'd moved out of town before the park was redone and other parks had been redone, they came back into town and said, when we left, it was sort of like the Wizard of Oz before, like in the black and white, before Dorothy opens the door and sees it all in Technicolor. Now it's like it's become in Technicolor. Yeah, it's a beautiful park. Yeah.
And we walk through the park occasionally, and we stop and talk to people there, and a lot of the people that we find in the park are not from Norcross. They're from Dunwoody, they're from Peachtree Corners, they're from all over the place, but they come there because they enjoy that park with its fountains and its splash pads.
Speaking of people coming into Norcross has really become a destination over the years. And I know there was concerted effort back in the early days of PDC and revitalization efforts to draw people into the town, and events were planned. And I know you were involved with Art Fest. Can you tell us a little bit about the origins there?
The Norcross Lions Club and the Norcross Women's Club used to put on a fall festival, and it was down in I forget the name of the park, Pinckneyville Park.
Oh, it was Pinckneyville, okay.
And then they moved it into Thrasher Park when I became, about the same year I think that I became a member of the Lions Club. And we put that festival on for a couple of years, and then a lady came along and looked at it and said, you know, I think that we could make this into a really spectacular event and make it an art fest. And this was in 2004, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And we hired her as a, let's say, a consultant
mm-hmm.
to do this. She had a lot of contacts in the art community, and she got the artists in. And the first year we had what we called then the Art Fest
mm-hmm.
in Thrasher Park. And that turned out to be a difficult location because the park is not level.
Yeah.
And putting
I
up
remember.
booths around
mm-hmm.
on that was a bit of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So then we moved it down onto the streets,
mm-hmm.
closed down the two major streets
mm-hmm.
in downtown Norcross, and had the artists set up their booths there. And it continued to grow, it continued to do well. Eventually, it became the Splash Arts Festival.
Mm-hmm.
Frances Shuby, who was the woman that came in, and Cindy Flynn eventually purchased the rights for the festival,
mm-hmm.
and they now run that festival and several others around the
mm-hmm.
metro area.
So it's
been very successful.
Very successful from very
It's pulled as many as 20,000, 30,000 people into Norcross for a weekend.
It's quite something when you think about the origins of that. And the idea, I guess, was really to bring people in, showcase the town,
Mm-hmm.
and bring business in for the businesses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We wanted to put a lot of people in front of the businesses
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people didn't know where Norcross was. Norcross is an interesting location.
Yeah.
As the Atlanta metro area built outward, a lot of the development went up Peachtree Industrial Boulevard.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it went up Interstate 85. Mm-hmm. And fortunately for Norcross, neither of those boulevards, major thoroughfares, went through Norcross. They went on both sides of it. And so the Norcross stayed in its sort of historic state during all that time. And that's been a really valuable asset in Norcross because you have the historic vibes.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done a lot to spruce up the city.
Mm-hmm.
You go through it now and you'll find nice landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
You find flowers along the streets. The facades of the buildings are nice. The DDA financed a lot of those facades to be upgraded with matching funds. And we're pretty proud of our city, and we get a lot of comments from people coming in about how much they like it.
Yeah, Norcross it started with such a beautiful, charming downtown, and in the historic preservation business, I guess you might say it was benign neglect that preserved it, thankfully, because it was a charming town, and it's just been enhanced so much through the efforts of you and so many others in our community.
I had a business meeting earlier this morning, and one of the people in it was an executive from Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And he said that he had been downtown Norcross last night, and he was just amazed at how busy the town was. Said you couldn't find a parking place. The town was just full. All of the restaurants were full. And it's just a really thriving little town right now.
Yeah. It's a remarkable transformation over time.
It has been. It's taken a lot of work, but it's paid off.
Yeah, things like that don't happen by accident, for sure. And it has been a lot of people.
And a feature of Norcross that we understand a lot of towns don't have is that the population has a lot of volunteers that come in and work in the town. There are, you know how many volunteers. What are there, 300 volunteers?
So, it's about a core group of about 300.
For the Art Fest that they put on every year. Yeah. And these people will show up at 4 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning.
It's a tradition.
To check in the artists, and they have a great time doing it.
Yes.
And there's just an awful lot of volunteer help in Norcross, which really makes a difference.
It's a big community spirit, for sure. You know, we've known each other a long time, and you know, as you look back on your years as a leader in Norcross, as you said, you thought the change in city government was a huge tipping point, if you will.
That was key, yes.
Key. If you were to sit down with future leaders or leaders now, would you have any advice for them? Words of wisdom?
Words of wisdom, I'm not sure. We kind of stumbled along and did the best we could as we went, but I would say depend on the people, keep the citizens involved, keep them knowing what's going on, and keep your eyes open for opportunities. And I remember Andras Duaney, who is a well-known author and architect, talking about his roles in planning cities. And the last time I heard him speak, he said that everything he had written up to that time he thought was wrong, because cities that prosper well are cities that grow organically. They're not planned. They happen because the communities are involved and working to make their communities better.
I don't think you could say it any better, and that sounds like what you and so many other people did in Norcross.
It took a lot of people to
yeah.
get all this done.
Yeah, it sure did. What do you think the next challenge is for Norcross?
Next challenges,
or opportunity,
yeah,
way
next
you want.
opportunities I think are, there's a couple of them that are in the mill right now. One of them is to develop the properties right around Lilly and Webb Park, and there's a firm that is well engaged in doing that right now. And then the Rock 10 campus, where the West Rock campus, where they had to move out because they didn't have the space to grow to that they needed. And there are plans now afoot to develop that into a mixed-use area. And some people disagree. They don't want as much density as is going to be result from those two communities.
Yeah.
But the real fact is that without density, you don't have thriving businesses. And so you can, your city can either wither or it can grow, and it has to grow because there are more and more people that live in that city. And I think these new developments are going to attract a lot of people that would not otherwise want to move into Norcross, because not everybody wants a huge suburban lot to take care of. And they want townhomes and they want apartments, and I think that's where the growth has to come from right now, because land is very scarce in Norcross.
Yeah, and people want to be there.
Yes, people want to be there. They're attracted to that downtown area.
Yeah.
They'd like to be able to walk to downtown.
That's all the reasons we all moved there too. Yeah.
Sure.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
I can't think of anything. I think you've pretty well covered the waterfront here.
You've covered it so nicely, Bob. You know, it's amazing when we look back, and I've learned so much from you as a community member. I mean, I think even with Art Fest, you know, I barely knew you guys, and jumped on board, and we've had a great run.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, we have. And I'm just delighted that you agreed to come and share this, because like we said, things don't happen by accident, and it's nice to put these pieces together. As a historian, I love to do that too. So thank you for all you've done for Norcross, and being such a great friend, and I look forward to, you know, our next opportunity, whatever that might be.
It's been my pleasure. It's been fun as we've gone along. It's been hard work, but it's been fun and it's been rewarding.
Yes, it has been. Thanks,
and
Bob.
I have no intention of stopping.
Yep, I agree. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.